artificial intelligence is fed by data. Data is like the fuel to drive artificial intelligence.
You see the way people actually apply the technology and how that is being spread into different markets. And I think something similar is going to happen for the tourism industry, whereby the technology is going to be introduced and people are going to find fascinating ways to apply it.
Namibia is full of amazing people, whether local or visiting. Join us for the conversation, where we discuss these incredible projects, interesting topics, and what makes Namibia so special. Today is a special theme that we want to discuss here at Gondwana, and it's a bit of an intimidating theme. We're talking about artificial intelligence. I think it's very actual in the world that we live in today, maybe even a bit controversial, but the good news is that I know nothing about this. So I hope I represent the viewers out there. And the other good news is I brought along today the real intelligence. Two of my colleagues from Gondwana who's gonna enlighten us and try to explain it to the dummy here in terms of artificial intelligence, and also to share some very exciting news in terms of what Gondwana's been busy with under the radar in terms of our own artificial intelligence. So today I welcome with me two of my colleagues, like I said, the real intelligence. Salim and Louis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I believe context is very important. So before we jump into this very interesting theme of artificial intelligence, just give me 1 minute in terms of context. What brought you here to this moment today in terms of your life in Namibia? Salim, let's start with you.
Awesome. So in terms of the field of study itself, I've had a passion for tech for quite some time now. I actually had a family friend who used to always fiddle around with PCs and stuff like that. So he was a major influence. And it also just played to my strengths as well, in terms of being really good with like physics, maths, and so on and so forth, as opposed to the arts, your languages. And it was sort of just like the natural path into the field. And then, of course, my mom's not the most chuffed about that. She always wanted a doctor and an accountant, but no complaints on my side. So with respect to my background in itself, I studied computer engineering at the University of Pretoria, and yeah, that's about it.
Cool. Louis?
I think you compare with Salim, I'm a dinosaur in this industry. I mean, after over 20 years, it's been a long time, but I think a lot of my good exposure happened in over a decade in the UK. Because you get exposed to so many new things and so many people and other skills that you get a very broad idea of how things work and how they interlock and how you can integrate and put them together. And I think that has shaped my career quite a bit, and the way of thinking and the way of looking at different things and just put them together into one cohesive solution and just make that work.
That's very cool. So, further to the good news, I brought questions today, and I had help with the questions just to guide me, because I'm not afraid to ask the dumb questions, but I don't want to give my level of intelligence away on this theme. So, tell us a bit about the history of AI and what is AI?
AI started. Most people don't realize it, but it started in the 1950s as a research program. And then very soon they ran into some limitations, and hardware was the main limitation. Computers could only process this much. And remember, in the 1950s, it wasn't even digital computers, it was analog computers. And they could get it to connect like your neurons in your brain and learn new things. It was taught to learn to recognize patterns, basically. Very rudimentary, but it sort of worked. Then there came a time where computer power was just not enough. And by the 80s, 70s and 80s, nobody touched AI. It was just not feasible. There was no funding. There was no real way of making this work. Then in about the 90s, the computer processing power became good enough to start doing things with artificial intelligence, not in the way we have now, but in very rudimentary ways. I mean, if you think about autocorrect text on your phone, if you think about your smartphone, the keyboard, if you actually press on those keys, it's not actually always where you press. There is a very rudimentary artificial intelligence behind that, working out the probabilities of which key you're pressing. I often get that it recommends the wrong one. But then it sort of progressed into machine learning and into better and better artificial intelligence. But what then it sort of had died down a little bit again till the 2000s, because now we had the computing power, but we didn't have enough data to feed it, because artificial intelligence is fed by data. Data is like the fuel to drive artificial intelligence. And once those things came together around 2015, I mean, another very big contributing factor to the type of AI we have now was NVIDIA. So NVIDIA in 2005 basically bet their entire company on artificial intelligence. And they developed the hardware to make the type of artificial intelligence that we have today even possible. And by 2015, that's when what we have today really started, and really the research and the progress have started until what we have now.
I'm already intimidated. Now jump forward to the present and the Gondwana context. When did the Gondwana AI journey start?
I don't know if Louis wants to take this one over, because it's more sort of his brainchild. I remember while he was away, he did a bit of research into artificial intelligence, and when he came back, he was quite eager to actually start applying the technology into the space. And it all just sort of happened to coincide with a few technical challenges that we had at Gondwana with respects to the load some of our consultants were facing, with respects to correspondence and so on and so forth. So one of the ways that we wanted to sort of tackle that challenge, again, Louis' brainchild, was to introduce artificial intelligence. And then again, this sort of coincided with the big boom of OpenAI. I'm sure everybody's heard of that already. And we decided to sort of use that as the foundation for the AI that we implemented ourselves. So I'd say around about January, February this year.
Yeah, I think in end of January when I returned, we sort of took 2 weeks to clear everything off our desks so that we can build a proof of concept as quickly as possible. And we managed to build the first proof of concept in a day and a half. It wasn't brilliant. It was quite sucky, but it was just proving the mechanics is there. The actual mechanics will work. And I mean, we demoed that to you guys at GECCO and basically told, go for it. And from there on, we just developed it until where we are now.
And that was the birth of GECCO.
It was.
The Gondwana AI consultant. GECCO stands for, I think, Gondwana Eco-Friendly Consultant Officer.
Gondwana Operative.
Operative, there we go.
You know what
Gondwana Electronic Customer Care Operative.
Operative.
There you go.
What I love is that GECCO has become such a persona already internally in Gondwana that it doesn't stand for anything. It's GECCO.
GECCO.
You know, and GECCO, and we're working on the GECCO persona, and because it's almost become a colleague. So tell us more about what GECCO is doing at the moment at Gondwana.
So the first step for us was to do the chat. So when you go to our website, the little chat in the bottom, if you click on that, the first encounter you'll have is with a GECCO AI. You won't be connected to a consultant straight away. You have the choice after your first sentence, or your first interaction to speak to a consultant. But that is your first interaction. And the idea was to basically take away all the busy work from the consultants. They get a lot of questions about what shoes to wear to Desert Grace. Should I bring a hat? What type of fish can I catch at Namushasha? What activities are there at Arnab? That sort of questions they have to answer all day. The problem with that is that it takes time away from them to make actual bookings. So we had the problem where people would send bookings in by email and they were not getting a response fast enough to their liking, and sometimes just not fast enough. because the consultants have to spend so much time in answering questions. And answering those questions is not something you can push to the side, because it is important for that person, and we need to answer it for that person. And that is where the Gekko AI really flourishes. It can answer all of those questions, some even more nuanced than others, but it does a really good job at answering those questions. We've also developed it to a point where it can check availability. So if you give it dates and a large name, it can actually tell you this is how many rooms is available for these dates. So it's really just to take as much pressure off the consultants to just make bookings and really do hand-holding to a high quality for the customers that really needs to talk to them.
I love how you explained that. You identified the problem, these rudimentary questions, and that we had some human hours spent on that. And also from the consultant perspective, that day in, day out, had to answer the same questions. And now this magical consultant is doing the work for us on behalf of the consultants. But explain that to me. Explain to me how this system works. Where does it get the information? You guys throw around words like, we taught it this, we taught... I taught my little son last night some fancy words, in terms of his reading books. That teaching I understand.
With respects to GECCO itself, as I mentioned before, it is based on OpenAI's GPT-3 and 4. We switch between the two models. And essentially what you have is a deep neural network. It's a deep multimodal neural network. So essentially you just have a bunch of different mathematical operations that are catered to solving certain types of problems, and you sort of lump those together and you'll get something where you feed it an input and it's going to generate some sort of output. Of course, I haven't read fully the actual technical details behind GPT-3 and or 4, just GPT in general. And it's something that I actually should do. I actually tried doing that in preparation for this. But in essence, what we have done is take their technology, which works superbly, and we've sort of given it information related to Gondwana collection itself to sort of ground the AI. It's a technical term that I think Microsoft is using. And then what we do is then return that response over to the actual client or user in our particular instance.
Salim made it sound more simple than it really is, and he did a superb job on this. It is more complicated than that, because here's the problem. If you ask a question, we first have to understand that question to know what data to pull from the database to give to the AI. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what is important. So, for example, if somebody asks, can I have a vegetarian meal at Desert Grace? In a normal old-time chatbot, it may have prioritized Desert Grace as the word you're looking for and start feeding you pricing on Desert Grace, which is not what you've asked. So the first thing we do is we need to figure out what are you asking, so that we can retrieve the appropriate information and ground that to the AI. And that is more complicated than most people realize. It's not as simple as just giving it all the data that we have, because we have limitations. We can only send it a certain amount of data. We can only keep messages for a certain amount of time. There's a lot of gymnastics and restrictions we have to comply with to make this whole thing work.
Where does GECCO get this information? Is it the Gondwana database? Is it the internet in general in terms of these questions? Because it's very Gondwana specific or Namibia specific in terms of travel.
The response to that will sort of be two-pronged, because OpenAI itself has been trained, depending on the model that you're using, it has been trained up until a certain time. I think GPT-3 was up until 2019, and then GPT-4 is up until 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So some of that information, because they trained the AI itself using the information that's available on the internet. So some of that information is publicly available, or OpenAI itself has that data available. But then some of the more up-to-date information, some of the stuff that is not necessarily readily available, like our rates, and those get updated quite frequently. Our availability, that gets updated quite frequently as well. That we had to now create an actual database and we try to sort of match your query. We extract sort of keywords from that. We try and extract the property and or entity that's related to your query. We try and also classify the query in itself. And using this, we try and find the data in the database that is most best suited to answer your actual question itself. And then we send that over to the AI. It does its little bit of magic. And then we actually generate a response for the user.
Everything that you've just described happens in seconds, because I've tested this extensively. I was playing around on our chat function. I was Fiona, but they caught me out. The real intelligence caught me out. They said, "Yeah, guys, we know it's you." But I mean, exactly like you explained it now, Salim. You would ask these weird questions, but it's a matter of seconds. You can actually see how Gekko thinks, and then retrieve the answer. So it's amazing how fast this happens.
I'm glad you say that it feels fast, because for us it feels insanely slow. We're always cringing that it should be faster. But there's a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. We've had to change our whole mindset of how we approach programming. There's complex programming tasks that we basically now offload to the AI for an answer, and then we make the decision based on the answer and then pass it back to the AI. But I mean, what makes it reasonably fast, which we couldn't do 10 years ago, is incredibly fast internet, incredibly large data centers in the cloud. So there's we're basically standing on the shoulder of giants, of real giants, and hundreds of billions of US dollars of investment. We can reap the benefit from it now.
Share a little bit with the viewers in terms of the journey, because, from my perspective, I think it was end of January, beginning of February. You did the first presentation to us. It was super impressive. And you had timelines of July, August, and then by the end of March or April, you have another beginning of April. You did another presentation and say, "Oh, forget about those timelines. It's done." So explain that journey, and then super important and super exciting. Where are we now and where are we going?
Initially, we would have had to actually train the AI. Using our data set itself, but on OpenAI's servers, and get our own model that has the Gondwana data set. But we quickly realized that was going to be a huge issue, because we had to roll back the version of OpenAI that they had available. Like if you use the actual chat functionality online on their website, we had to do tasks that they already done with their models that were available, like teaching it how to greet and so on and so forth. It was quite a challenge, and a lot of the time was actually allocated to having our internal staff work on the actual, interact with the actual bot and generate data so that we could continuously train it up to the point where it could respond in such a way that Gekko is responding now. Another issue was also just wrapping our head around the technologies that are available to us, like how are we actually going to connect the actual AI itself with the chat functionality? How are we going to pass the information between the bot and the user, so on and so forth? And as we went on, OpenAI itself started releasing more up-to-date versions of the API, more up-to-date versions of their models as well. And we leveraged that, and that's what actually expedited the entire training process. And you also need to understand that we're also learning as the process was going on, and we started figuring out that there's a lot that we actually had to wrap our heads around. Like there's now what I believe, what Louis also mentions, is going to be possibly an entire field on its own, which is now prompt engineering, where you are actually generating the text which you're going to actually pass to the AI for it to give you the most optimal response. And so wrapping our heads around all of that, and also keeping up to date with the changes that OpenAI, as well as the other infrastructure that we're making use of. It's also key to note that that itself is still in its beta phase, and that's what we use to actually communicate with the end user. And that in itself also had several technical challenges. Earlier you mentioned that it feels like seconds, and Louis said for us it feels like a lifetime. The reason why it feels like a lifetime because we actually ran into timeouts. So that means the entire process of getting your query, feeding it to the actual AI, and then pulling the data, feeding it back to the AI, and then returning it to the user, that initially had a 20-second timeout. And you're making HTTP requests, connecting to databases, trying to compile that data, and then send it back to the user. We had to get around that. We had to mitigate that particular technical challenge. And then that's where we now changed our approach again and use a different version of the actual APIs. And yeah, I could go on for days, as you can see.
Look, and I think from a user perspective, generally, not only for Gondwana customers, generally for travelers to Namibia, I think it's so powerful in terms of general questions, regarding Namibia. When can I travel? What should I do? All those things, because it's not only Gondwana focused, it's Namibia focused. But Louis, what now? Where are we going?
The major things we're mostly done with. I mean, one of the things we're rolling out very, very soon is distances. So the GECCO had a huge problem with accurate distances between either our lodges and the town or between towns in just general directions. So we've already developed a solution for that. That will go live very soon. So that will be a huge improvement. One of the other things that we will do soon is emails. So the challenge with emails is not so much technical as it is a quality issue. So we've done 3,886 tests for chat from real chats people's had with our consultants throughout the few years. With emails, because the stakes is higher with emails, people see email more like this is it, it's cast in stone. So we will need probably to do 3 to 4 times more testing on emails than that. Email will be a huge game changer. Then little iterations, little changes that most people won't feel is we're working on ways to give GECCO more context of what you're doing on our website. So what we see a lot is someone will look at a lodge page and then start chatting with GECCO, assuming GECCO knows everything they did in the last 5 minutes on our website without giving it clear instructions. And GECCO struggles with that because it has no idea. So we're working on ways of making that better. So GECCO understands what you've done, which lodge you looked at last. So if you don't give it a lodge name, it will assume that's the lodge you're talking about. And then the answers are better quicker without a back and forth. The other thing we started working on that's a bigger need than we thought is we have some guardrails in place, but we need to put more robust guardrails so that people don't go too much off topic. And just for safety reasons as well. So we don't give information that's inappropriate. That's one thing. And the way that we feed data to GECCO, at the moment it's all right, but it can be a lot better with completely different technologies that are fairly new, but much, much more efficient at doing these kind of things. I think for the immediate future, that's where we're heading, and those are the things coming up. But who knows? Where we are, we're already far beyond where we projected we would have been in October. So who knows? In 6 months' time, this may all have changed again.
But I agree with you in terms of the emails. We're so grateful to be in a place where we have, this rush of inquiries or bookings coming in, and you need a human being on the other side to service that, a human being that works 8-9 hours a day, while AI, GECCO doesn't sleep. And also those inquiries come from all over the world. So, if I understand you correct, that, part of the dream is that you will send an email regarding an inquiry or booking, and you will receive an email reply from GECCO.
Yes.
Within probably seconds.
Yeah. So the technical part is mostly done. We technically can already do that. What we're trying to evaluate is the quality of the answers good enough? Because GECCO can check availability. So if you send an availability request, it can check and reply via email to you. It can answer questions because a lot of the chat questions our consultants also receive an email. So it can answer all of those. We are also working on getting GECCO to make bookings, but not in the way most people think. we don't have an intention at this point for you to send an email or a chat and GECCO just makes the booking and you pay for it. And there's various reasons for it. One is, again, a quality issue. So we are releasing an internal GECCO booking system, which our consultants can copy and paste an email or a chat message in. GECCO will go and make the booking. The consultant will verify it did it correctly and then just confirm it. So it will speed up the whole booking process to a large extent. And once we're happy that the quality is high enough, we can consider making it just automated. But at the moment, we like having our consultants just there to verify, but also to give that human touch, but make them as efficient and augmented as possible using AI.
I think that's a very important point, is that the intention is an enabler. This is to help with productivity. It's not to replace people.
Yes.
We have always been and we will always be a people-centric company, and I think it's an amazing gift to our consultants. Because this is a tool. This is a tool in the toolbox. I think, Louis, you shared the stats with GECCO. I think it was 80% of the chats last week. 87% of the chats last week were handled by GECCO. Yes. Without any interaction with a human being. So that speaks to customer experience and to efficiency from the consultant perspective. I think we should just mention that the good news is that from a user perspective, you can always choose. You can always choose, and we will always be open and transparent to say you're speaking to GECCO, so that you can know, because you use that word, that human touch, and I think it's very important in the world that we live in that we I love the fact that we are trendsetters. We are there, with the great intelligence of especially the two of you, but that we still cater for the Tanny who wants to call and to speak to a human being, and I get that, and we have to cater for it all. I must tell you, the one thing that kind of blew my mind is when your team leader really challenged me. He said, "Guys, ask GECCO a question in Afrikaans," and I got a reply in Afrikaans.
So GECCO can technically do 220 languages. When we first launched it, it could only do 168, and we've tested it in German, and I was assured that it's good German. I wouldn't know. We've tested it in Italian and French, and I was assured the answers are very good. Afrikaans we've tested, so it can do 220 languages. One of the challenges we're facing is that if we allow GECCO, so we try to limit GECCO's answers to English only, doesn't always listen. But the challenge that we have is if a person from France starts chatting in French, our website has a French edition, and they do the whole booking, and suddenly they arrive and the person at the airport can't speak French when they pick them up. We've created an expectation that we should not have. So we really try hard to let GECCO always respond in English as far as possible. I mean, that's the one challenge. The other challenge is if a person had a whole conversation in Turkish, nobody here can speak Turkish, and now the consultant needs to take over. They have no idea what's going on. So we try to limit GECCO to always respond in English, but it doesn't always listen.
We've spoken a lot now about the solution that GECCO offers to Gondwana, but it's clear, and we're cutting our teeth, and we're bringing this child up to become a real member of the Gondwana family. But it's clear that GECCO offers solutions to the wider world in terms of maybe other corporates in Namibia, maybe not only travel companies.
Yeah, so we designed GECCO from the very beginning to be a product on its own, potentially. And there was a few reasons for it. First of all, we felt that we were so on the cutting edge that we do have something that can shortcut this journey for a lot of other people. So that was part of the design, and we have internal customers that we can test it on basically as customers to make them self-reliant on it. So yes, it's very possible, and we've done a lot of work to make it as easy as possible for anyone to basically train the AI and to get accurate answers. And you can, for like pricing, that if that changes regularly, you'd say there's an easy way of just changing it, and the AI will give you an accurate answer.
You touched on a few things there, Louis, in terms of setting perimeters, having boundaries. The very good point in terms of the languages, and it's living out there. It's typical with new technology that people are fearful, and then I think rightfully so. What is it that we have to be careful here in terms of with AI? And I'm not talking GECCO specific. I'm talking about general in the world out there.
So I think with AI, I've said, I'm a dinosaur in the industry. I've seen quite a few things. And I think with AI will happen exactly the same thing that has happened with automation in the early 2000s and outsourcing in the mid 2000s, is it'll be a pendulum effect. Companies will try to maximize profits using this technology, and they will push it as far as they can. They will get rid of as many people as they can in order to grow profits and replace that with AI. And then the pendulum will swing back, like it has done with automation and outsourcing. It will swing back because people realize a few things. One, if you use AI too extensively in your company, you lose control. You're basically putting an AI in control of your company and of your customer experience, which people don't think about when they start developing these things, but at some point they realize they've lost control. The second problem is that at some point, companies are going to say the way we differentiate is when you contact us, you speak to a person, you don't speak to a machine. And then the pendulum will start to swing back to the other way. And then eventually we'll find a middle ground where we try to be at right now and remain there, is a blend between AI and people and being an augmenter and an enabler rather than a threat and a replacer.
So tell me, Louis, are you a computer?
I don't think so, but how would I know?
Salim?
I can't be too sure. Genuinely can't be too sure.
You see, the one computer supporting the other computer to convince the human that they're not computers.
Maybe.
I don't trust you.
Give us a few red captures.
Where do we switch you off? No, I think it's super exciting, and I love that answer, Louis. It's a toolbox. It's an enabler. And what I also like, both from a Gondwana perspective and that but maybe also from a Namibian perspective, is that why do we always need to be followers? Let's do these things ourselves. Within the perimeters, with that balance in mind. I love what Manny always says, that we keep it real. I'm completely convinced. There's no future in digital tourism. To have a cold beer with your barefoot in the red sand. No augmented reality is going to replace that. So we can always keep it real. But to use AI, like we do now with chats, maybe email coming forward, because from a customer perspective, that is so important. There's nothing more frustrating than to send a mail because I want to make a booking. It might be Friday afternoon and then only getting a reply, by next week in terms of, well, do they have availability? Has the booking been made? So that things like that can happen instant. And I think that is so important from a customer perspective. So hopefully we can get that balance right, that we, that everyone wins.
100%. I completely agree. I just want to sort of add a bit of a caveat to that, because we actually we saw a bit of that in the process of actually developing GECCO, whereby some people are a little apprehensive about it. There's a bit of murmuring in terms of how this is going to affect them, but then you found other people that sort of took that leap of faith, especially after they realized or saw how this could benefit them in the future. I can give an example of one of the consultants that got a very bizarre query where she was like, my goodness, how do I answer this? She had to go ahead and Google it and so on and so forth. And then she sent this to Louis. Louis popped that into GECCO, and the response was absolutely sublime. And then I think after that, we started to see sort of a shift whereby they started now interacting with GECCO to actually send their responses to clients either via email and or via chat. So I think it's a process of people sort of acquainting themselves with the technology, coming to understand it, and also trust it to a certain extent. And then from there, you might see a nice little uptick in terms of efficiency.
Well, but Salim, I love that, and I think we should never underestimate it. It's still change management 101. Someone like me, my personality is I'm always an early adapter. I love it. I'm curious. I'm playing around with this. For other people, they don't like change. They say, "Ooh, what is this thing?" So that story, and hopefully more and more of that stories will build that trust, and it will enable that balance that you've spoken about, Louis. That a consultant can say, "Wait a minute, this is not a threat. This is a tool in my toolbox. This is something that will make me look good in the interest of the guest, in the interest of the customer." And I think that is so important. I think it's so important in terms of tourism in general in Namibia. It is going so much better, and we're so grateful for that. But we cannot afford to lose a single booking. We cannot afford to frustrate a single guest out there, because the world is competitive. Well, I wanted to go to Namibia. I didn't get a reply in 2 days, so I'm going to Chile or whatever. So hopefully to really be an enabler in the tourism industry, and to invite the industry in general to be part of this solution, because again it's about customer centricity combined with the people centricity on our side, and we must respect that journey, like you said, Salim. Do it with our people, and not only to our people, because and I think I represent that lay person. It's super exciting, but it is intimidating. I sit here and I nod with everything that you say. 90%, I don't have a cookie clue what you're talking about. But it's not about the technical details in the background. It's about the experience, the user experience, and that is what I love. And that is what I love. I love the execution of what's happened. In terms of the vision that you created with us, beginning of February, and 2 months later, the execution thereof, the customer experience of that. Where do you see this going forward? We've touched on emails. Any other things that we can play around, the things that you think that might happen with AI in the future?
I think for us, definitely, we will start using AI more and more internally for things like data analysis. I mean, you mentioned the AI report we generate every week. What you may not realize is 2/3 of that statistics was AI analyzed and given. So we feed it that week's data, and it comes up with 2/3 of those statistics within seconds. And the way the data is structured, it was very difficult. It would have taken a couple of hours to extract that same information every week. So we just now feed it to the AI, and it gives us that kind of statistics. So I think that will definitely be something we will explore more and more internally, to see trends, to see where we can improve things, because AI can see things that we can't. It can make connections two things. One, it can make connections we cannot see clearly. And the second thing is it can look at vast amounts of data that for our little brains just can't handle. So that's definitely an area that will improve. I think something that's coming up, which we probably will experiment with in the next 18 months, is AI decision making. Not to take over from people decision making, but to assist in making decisions. I mean, if we look at COVID and how everybody just basically made decisions emotionally without really knowing and understanding what they're doing. If we had an AI-assisted decision-making model, which is emotionless, it works on facts, it takes a vast amount of data into consideration, the outcomes may have been very, very different for a lot of companies if that was available. So that is something we definitely also be exploring in the future.
I love that. It's again a tool in the toolbox, to help us make better and faster decisions, because we are emotional beings. And I think so often of the things that we got wrong is because we come with a perspective of sentiment instead of objectivity. As long as we can still have that cold beer in the red dune and be sentimental about that, I'm all for it.
If I may, I just wanted to sort of add to what Louis said. In terms of the technology itself, it's been a bit of a disruptor in the market, because they came out with this technology and it had sort of this general purpose in terms of being a language model. But then you see the way people actually apply the technology and how that is being spread into different markets. Like you have people like Chegg, who lost their stocks actually dropped, and Duolingo, because people started using OpenAI to actually now translate stuff for them, or learn a new language, and then or teach them some arithmetic and so on and so forth. And I think something similar is going to happen for the tourism industry, whereby the technology is going to be introduced and people are going to find fascinating ways to apply it, and new and improved ways of doing things may emerge from that.
Probably things we can't think of right now.
100%.
I mean, we may develop something in 18 months from now. We might have developed something completely different from what we're doing now. Because even if we look back in beginning of February, we had no idea we will be where we are now. We thought we would be close to this by the end of October. So who knows? Just as things happen and develop and we iterate small steps at a time, one day you wake up and say, oh, now we can do this.
In terms of the beginning, the context that we set, this is your field. This is your context. I'm wondering to myself, are you having fun?
Very much.
Is it?
We had a lot of laughs during this process.
And learnings?
Very much. I mean, the challenge was, this was so new, we couldn't Google our problems. There wasn't. At some point, we did ask the AI, and it did help. But we really had to sit together and talk through different angles and different approaches, come back to first principles. How do we solve this? And every time we were successful and we solved it. And I think what helped a lot is that we work very, very well together, and just work together. There's no, my idea is the best idea. And we fail. We've made many failings during the process, but our philosophy from the beginning was, failure is fine, just do it fast. We need to know this approach is not working very quickly, so we can change it. It shouldn't take months, hours or days, then we need to know if this is working or not. And it was a lot of fun. We had so many laughs in the beginning, especially when the AI would come up with absurd stuff that is completely wrong, but funny sometimes.
I mean, it's always frustrating when you keep bumping your head against a certain type of wall, but much like Louis said, you'd rather fail fast. And then from there, once you see it start to pan out, it's like, wow, that's really impressive. And then another thing is, while we're in the process of actually now familiarizing ourselves with the actual AI, you'd go on into full debates as to, okay, no, but you made this mistake, actually with the AI itself now, and you're going back and forth with the bot. So that was quite a nice experience, and there's been quite a few of those, as well as just feeding through some of the queries that we get from our clients or customers out there, and seeing what the AI generates, and then seeing how that has improved steadily over the time that we've been working on this has been quite a marvel, if I do say so myself. And much like you said, much like Louis said earlier, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. There are people that have dedicated long, hard hours and lots of money into this, so that we have the ability to make use of their products. So, I mean, a big thank you to them. They've definitely made the last few months quite exciting for all of us.
Would have loved to be a witness on this fight between Salim and the bot. Look.
A very good example of one of those fights is the way that we fed the data to the AI. We basically use large names, but we've put Namibia to go and go to under those names as large names. And we fed a query from a chat into the AI when we were testing it. And it just didn't mention Namibia to go. So we asked it, why do you know what Namibia to go does? It says, yes, it's a car rental company. We said, why didn't you suggest it in your answer? He said, because it's under lodge name. It's not a lodge. It's very literal sometimes.
Look, yeah, people management is part of my job, and sometimes it's hard work. As long as I don't get an inquiry in terms of Gekko wants to come and see me to complain about the two of you, because then I think we've gone too far. We've chatted a lot about now the impact on AI, specifically on tourism, but what other fields in the digital realm out there do you foresee AI playing a role or having an impact in the future?
For me, where I see a lot of things happening is in the sales area of different industries. You will soon, and you already have it to a large extent, will be able to have a full-on AI salesperson that can make calls, that can do presentations, and that can have a valuable conversation with a prospective customer or client, and could take that client from the very beginning all the way through to an actual sale. I think that is going to be something that's going to explode in the next 18 to 24 months, because there's a lot of technologies that's maturing right now, AI technologies that are maturing, that will be able to put that sort of together.
And then from my side, there was mention of it being quite effective in the gaming industry itself, in terms of now you can have full-blown conversations with NPCs. But I also want to add to that a little bit, whereby...
So, what is an NPC?
It's a non-player character, I think. Non-playable character, yeah. So essentially just the bots that you see around in the actual game environment. But what I wanted to touch on was just the game development process. You had Unreal Engine that just recently released a new version, and they introduced AI into just generating the environment itself. And instead of having to now go ahead and, you're designing each artifact in the actual, in your map, you can leverage AI and then scale your map into a huge environment. So sooner or later you'll see smaller gaming companies that can make immensely large games, or largely explorable games, and I think that's quite fascinating.
Louis, share the story in terms of you use fancy words. The only thing I remember is the keys to the kingdom of how Gondwana, and the vision I have in my mind is the door was closing and we slipped in to get the license or whatever to do what we do with GECCO.
So I think a lot of things sort of came together. I came back from a long sick leave and having spent months on AI and research, because I saw this thing was happening fast. And I knew, because I could see it in our stats, that our consultants are struggling. So when I came back to the office end of January, I was like a man on fire. I literally, everyone who wanted to listen, I said, this is the most important technology of our lifetimes. We need to get on board this right now. So the challenge is for us to be able to use the base models of OpenAI is we need a way to integrate into their backend. ChatGPT is sort of the front end, but their backend, we need a way to get in there, and that is called an API. So we get a key to do that. So luckily, our team leader, Irene, listened very quickly, and she gave us a card, and we registered for that API key. Because you pay for every call we make to them. We actually pay a small amount. And we registered it, we got it, and we started developing it. And about 3 days later, OpenAI announced they're not giving in any new API keys out anymore. They may in the future, but at that point, they closed it down. So we literally made it by like 3 days. Otherwise, there was no way of developing GECCO at all.
I love how that speaks to the agility of Gondwana. How you could see what the future. The two of you clean your desks, speak to Irene, and within a day or two, it's done. We have the keys to the kingdom, and then you could start playing in the kingdom. And this is where we are today. I think it's a real lesson in terms of the agility, in terms of fast decision making, in terms of an innovative culture, and listening to your people. When they say, guys, this is something happening, we have to act now.
I think it was a great compliment to Gondwana leadership, all of you guys. I mean, this basically what happened is we had this vision, we got the bought in, but we were never bogged down with too much details. I mean, we were asked for a roadmap, which we produced, but after that, we were just left alone. And because we were left alone, we could iterate very, very quickly. We did give little updates of where we are, but nobody interfered. We were just left and trusted that this thing will work or we'll figure it out. And we did. And that, I think, is a very a big compliment to leadership. Sometimes you just need to leave people to do the job.
Definitely trust, but don't underestimate the role of ignorance. We didn't have a cookie clue what you were talking about. But gentlemen, this has been really enlightening to me. Thank you so much. I think you, in my mind at least, demystified it, but also that excitement is there, in terms of where we are at the moment. And please go and experiment with it, on our chat function. Hopefully soon more than that, maybe emails as well on that. And exactly like you said, Louis, who knows what's going to come from this. I'm super excited, both for Gondwana and for whoever out there in the world. And as long as we use it right, as long as our intention is right, which I know for a fact is the case at Gondwana, it can be a game changer, an enabler in a very competitive world. So I think also from a Gondwana perspective, well done to the two of you. Really, I don't think there are many individuals in Namibia that have gone through the road that the two of you have gone through. That's already built a GECCO and had fun and some mistakes along the way. So well done to the two of you, and thank you for your amazing hard work. And yeah, keep on having fun.
Thank you.
Okay.